The grand assembly hall of Nexus Station hummed with the low murmur of 300 distinct species, a cacophony of clicking mandibles, telepathic whispers, and translated voices. Suspended in the center of the cavernous chamber, a three-dimensional holographic representation of the Milky Way slowly rotated, highlighting the territory's trade routes and diplomatic connections that bound the Galactic Council together. Today marked the 5th anniversary of Earth's admission to this interstellar community, though the atmosphere was far from celebratory. John Miller stood alone at the human delegation's platform, his tall frame rigid with tension. As Earth's sole representative to the Council, he had endured countless accusations over the past 5 years. The latest session had stretched into its 14th hour, and the Council's scrutiny had grown increasingly hostile. Representative Miller came the resonant voice of Vexinar the Rylaxian Elder, who presided over today's proceedings. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence as his translator converted his clicks and whistles into standard galactic. The expansion rate of human outposts has exceeded allocated quotas by 17% in the Orion sector alone. Furthermore, your species continues to adapt technologies beyond approved safety thresholds. John maintained his composure, though his jaw clenched momentarily. High Counselor, as I've explained in our previous 11 sessions, humanity's colonization efforts remain within the negotiated parameters when accounting for the supplementary addendum ratified last solar cycle. As for technological adaptations, we've submitted all required documentation and safety protocols. From across the chamber, a serpentine figure with scales that shimmered with bioluminescent patterns rose to speak. The Slossith Consensus questions the thoroughness of Earth's documentation, hissed Counselor Zithar. Humans have demonstrated unprecedented integration capabilities with neural technologies. The rate of adaptation suggests undisclosed research initiatives. John had prepared for these accusations. He accessed his neural interface, ironically, the very technology under scrutiny, and projected the relevant data streams to the central holographic display. All neural interface advancements have been documented and shared with the Technology Exchange Commission. The accelerated adaptation rate is simply a biological characteristic of human neuroplasticity, as confirmed by the Xenobiology Institute's assessment from 3 cycles ago. High Chancellor Zelthera, an ancient being of pure energy, contained within an ornate exosuit, floated forward. Her voice emerged calm but resolute. The question is not whether your species has shared its technological advances, Representative Miller. The concern is whether humanity can be trusted with such rapid neural evolution. No other species in Council history has integrated synthetic interfaces with their nervous systems at such alarming speed. An uncomfortable silence fell over the assembly. John felt his pulse quicken, but maintained a diplomat's neutral expression. This was the real issue, not bureaucratic regulations or expansion quotas, but fear. Fear of humanity's potential, fear of a species too adaptable for comfort. Counselor Trin, a smaller being whose crystalline body structure refracted light in hypnotic patterns, spoke next. Perhaps we should consider an arrangement beneficial to all parties. Given the unique capabilities of humanity, additional safeguards would provide reassurance to the Council while allowing Earth to continue its growth trajectory. John's neural interface detected the subtle shift in the chamber's atmospheric composition, a sign of tension among the many species that communicated through chemical signals. "What kind of safeguards do you propose, Counselor?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer. Vexinar's appendages manipulated a series of controls before him, and a new hologram appeared beside the galactic map. It depicted a small device, no larger than a human thumbnail. "Neural monitors," the presiding officer announced. "A simple solution. These would be installed on all human vessels and outposts, calibrated to monitor intention patterns among your crews and colonists. Any detection of potentially dangerous technological implementations or aggressive expansion would trigger an immediate alert to Council authorities." John stared at the hologram, momentarily speechless. The implications were staggering. These weren't just monitoring devices. They were thought police. The council wasn't proposing to watch what humans did. They wanted to monitor what humans might do to police intention itself. He turned to face the full assembly, scanning the faces, appendages, and sensory organs of 300 species. Some appeared uneasy, others expectant. A few, those who had also felt the heavy hand of council regulation, showed subtle signs of sympathy. High Counselor Vexinar Chancellor Zelthera, esteemed representatives. John began, his voice steady despite the anger building within him. For 5 years, humanity has participated in good faith within this council. We have shared our innovations, contributed to defense initiatives, resolved logistical crises at 15 stations, and provided engineering expertise that has improved quality of life across 57 systems. He paused, letting his words sink in. The translation systems buzzed around the chamber as his statement was converted into hundreds of languages. In return, we have faced constant suspicion, regulatory obstacles, and now, this. He gestured toward the neural monitor hologram, a device that would violate the most fundamental right of any sentient being, the privacy of thought. No human vessel will ever carry such a device. No human colony will ever install such invasive technology. Murmurs and chemical signals intensified throughout the chamber. John could feel the weight of thousands of eyes, optical sensors, and sensory appendages upon him. Earth hereby withdraws from all council deliberations effective immediately. The chamber erupted. Some delegates leapt to their feet, or equivalent appendages. Others released colorful clouds of shock pheromones, while several telepathic species broadcast emotional waves so powerful that the station's dampening fields activated automatically. Order, order in the assembly. Vexinar's amplified voice reverberated through the chamber, but the cacophony only intensified. John stood unmoved amidst the chaos. 5 years of diplomatic restraint had reached its breaking point. The neural monitors were not just an insult. They represented everything wrong with the Council's approach to humanity, fear disguised as caution control, masked as cooperation. High Chancellor Zelthera's exosuit floated directly toward John's platform, bypassing protocol completely. Representative Miller, surely we can discuss this matter further. A full withdrawal would have severe economic implications for Earth, and the decision is made, Chancellor. John interrupted something he had never dared do before. Economic implications are preferable to surrendering our autonomy. You fear our potential so much that you would rather cage our minds than see what we might become. He tapped his neural interface, sending the formal withdrawal notification to every delegation simultaneously. The document appeared on personal interfaces and screens throughout the chamber, a diplomatic bombshell delivered with perfect timing. The Earth does not turn its back on peaceful cooperation. John continued, his voice clear above the diminishing chaos. We remain open to bilateral relations with individual systems, but we will no longer subject ourselves to the collective paranoia of this council. With that, John turned and walked toward the chamber's exit, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence that had fallen over the assembly. As the massive doors parted before him, he heard Vexinar's voice once more. Representative Miller, this action violates 17 sections of the Council Charter. The consequences will be severe. John paused at the threshold, but didn't turn around. So will the consequences of your fear, High Counselor. Then, he stepped through the doorway, leaving the stunned council behind. The moment the assembly doors closed behind him, John's composed diplomatic facade cracked. His hands trembled slightly as he leaned against the corridor wall, the full weight of what he'd just done crashing down upon him. Earth had joined the Galactic Council after decades of preparation, negotiation, and technological advancement. With a few sentences, he had severed that connection. John. He looked up to see Susan Clark hurrying toward him. As Earth's ambassador to Nexus Station, she managed the day-to-day diplomatic operations, while John represented humanity in the council itself. I just got the notification, she said, her face pale. Did you really just... Yes, John straightened up. We need to activate emergency protocols immediately. How many Earth personnel are currently on the station? Susan's training kicked in despite her shock. 173 diplomatic staff, 42 trade representatives, and approximately 300 civilian contractors and families. Initiate evacuation procedures for all non-essential personnel, John instructed. Priority transport for families with children. Essential diplomatic staff will remain until the last civilian is safely away. Susan nodded, her neural interface already connecting to Earth's secure network. What about the Phoenix Protocol? John's expression hardened. The Phoenix Protocol had been created shortly after Earth joined the Council, a contingency plan that no one had ever truly expected to use. It detailed the exact procedures for withdrawing from the Galactic Council if necessary, including the reallocation of resources, diplomatic messaging, and security measures. Send the activation code to Admiral Davis and Director Powell. Authorization Miller Omega 753. As Susan transmitted the code, John's interface buzzed with an incoming communication from Counselor Trin. He declined it without hesitation. The time for talk had passed. They're not going to let this happen without a fight, Susan said, looking down the corridor where security personnel from various species were already beginning to gather, watching them cautiously. Not a physical one, at least, John replied. The Council needs humanity more than they're willing to admit. Our engineers run half their critical infrastructure, our medical techniques have advanced their healing capabilities, and our defensive systems protect 15 crucial border stations. A commotion at the far end of the corridor caught their attention. A group of alien merchants were closing their shops, hastily securing valuable merchandise, as news of Earth's withdrawal spread throughout the station. It's already starting, Susan observed. Economic panic. John nodded grimly. We need to reach the Earth Embassy. It's sovereign territory they can't legally enter without permission. Together, they moved quickly through corridors that were growing increasingly chaotic. Aliens of countless forms hurried in all directions, some fleeing the diplomatic sector entirely, others rushing toward it for information. The station's announcement system began broadcasting messages in multiple languages, calling for calm and stating that all travel restrictions remained in effect, a clear attempt to prevent a mass exodus. They'll try to detain our ships, Susan said as they turned down a less crowded service corridor. Admiral Davis will have anticipated that, John replied. The Phoenix Protocol includes contingencies for blockades. When they finally reached the Earth Embassy, they found it already in emergency mode. Staff members were securing data systems, gathering essential equipment, and preparing for evacuation. Ambassador Clark immediately took charge of the civilian evacuation plans while John secured a private communication chamber. Inside, he activated the quantum entanglement communicator technology that even the Council couldn't intercept. The holographic figures of Admiral Paul Davis and Director Karen Powell materialized before him. Both were located in the Strategic Command Center beneath Geneva. Representative Miller. Admiral Davis acknowledged, his weathered face grim. Phoenix Protocol confirmed and initiated. Director Powell, who oversaw civilian operations, looked concerned but resolute. All Earth vessels have been notified. Diplomatic outposts across Council space are implementing security measures. What's the situation on Nexus Station? John described the Council's proposal for neural monitors and his subsequent withdrawal declaration. The economic impact will be immediate. The Council relies heavily on human expertise and technology, but they'll try to leverage their numerical advantage and control of key resource systems. Admiral Davis nodded. We've been running simulations for years. Without human engineers and security experts, 15 major stations will experience critical systems failures within days. 12 border defense networks will become vulnerable within weeks. And they know this, John added, which means they'll try to prevent our full withdrawal, especially of key personnel. Director Powell consulted something off-screen. The first contingency vessels are already en route to extract our people from the most vulnerable locations. As for Nexus Station itself, we have 3 diplomatic cruisers nearby that can be diverted for evacuation. What about retaliation? John asked. Admiral Davis's expression remained stoic. Minimal risk of direct military action. The Council's combined fleet is formidable, but their command structure requires consensus from at least 60% of member species for offensive operations. They won't achieve that quickly, if at all. The greater threat, Director Powell interjected, is economic isolation. 73% of our off-world trade flows through Council-controlled routes and stations. John had considered this. We've been preparing alternative channels through independent systems for years. It won't be seamless, but we'll adapt. Just like we always have, Admiral Davis said with a hint of a smile. The resource reallocation phase of Phoenix is already underway. Research funding that went to Council-mandated projects is being redirected to our independent initiatives. The Neural Interface program will see a threefold increase immediately. The very technology that had frightened the Council would now develop even faster without their restrictions. John found a certain irony in that. "Keep me updated," he said. "Ambassador Clark and I will secure the evacuation from this end." As the holographic figures disappeared, John took a moment to steady himself. Humanity had just taken its first steps on a new path, one without the guidance or constraints of the Galactic Council. The road ahead would be challenging, uncertain, and potentially dangerous, but it would be their own. The next 12 hours on Nexus Station unfolded in a blur of activity. Susan Clark masterfully coordinated the evacuation procedures, prioritizing families with children, medical personnel, and civilian contractors. John focused on securing their diplomatic assets and maintaining communication with Earth Command. The Council had indeed attempted to impose travel restrictions, but Earth's diplomatic cruisers invoked ancient provisions in interstellar law that guaranteed safe passage during political transitions. When physical barriers proved insufficient, economic reality quickly asserted itself. As news of humanity's withdrawal spread across the station, markets plummeted. Trade in human goods halted entirely, while speculation about technological stability sent investors into panic. Nexus Station's central promenade, usually a vibrant showcase of galactic commerce, had transformed into a chaos of shuttered shops and anxious aliens. Merchants who had built entire businesses around human products watched helplessly as their livelihood evaporated. Banking interfaces displayed cascading failures across multiple economic indices. Representative Miller. John turned to see a Dravidi merchant approaching, his forearms gesticulating wildly. The amphibious trader had supplied Earth diplomats with exotic foodstuffs for years. "Please, you must reconsider," the merchant pleaded, bioluminescent patches on his skin, flashing in distress patterns. "My entire supply chain depends on human customers. 3 generations of my family have built this business." Similar scenes played out across the station as the economic shockwaves intensified. Council security forces struggled to maintain order as protests erupted in multiple sectors. Most weren't protesting Earth's decision, they were demanding that the Council reverse whatever policies had driven humans away. In the midst of this growing chaos, John received an urgent summons from High Chancellor Zelthera. Against Susan's advice, he agreed to one final meeting. The Chancellor's private chamber was a stark contrast to the chaos outside, serene, dimly lit, and protected by energy fields that blocked all electronic signals. Zelthera's exosuit hovered silently in the center of the room, the energy being within pulsing with subdued colors. Representative Miller. Her voice emerged calm as ever. "I appreciate your willingness to meet despite the circumstances." John remained standing. "I can spare 10 minutes, Chancellor. Our evacuation is ongoing." "I have just come from an emergency session of the Executive Council," Zelthera said. "The proposal regarding neural monitors has been unanimously withdrawn." "It's too late for that," John replied. The proposal itself revealed the Council's true perspective on humanity. "You see us not as partners, but as threats to be contained." The energy within Zelthera's suit pulsed more rapidly. "You must understand the Council's position. In our 100,000 years of existence, No species has ever developed and adapted as quickly as humanity. What took others millennia, you achieve in decades. It creates discomfort. Discomfort doesn't justify thought policing, John countered. Humanity joined this council in good faith, seeking peaceful cooperation and mutual advancement. Instead, we've faced 5 years of increasing restrictions and suspicion. Because your potential is both magnificent and terrifying. Zelthera admitted, surprising John with her candor. Several elder species believe that without proper guidance, humanity might evolve beyond our collective ability to influence. Some even suggest you could become the dominant power in this galactic sector within a century, a mere blink in cosmic time. John finally understood. The neural monitors weren't about safety protocols or regulation compliance. They were about fear of obsolescence, fear of a future where humanity's rapid evolution might render ancient power structures irrelevant. That fear has now created exactly the outcome you were trying to prevent, John observed. Instead of guiding human development within your frameworks, you'll now have to contend with our independent progress. Zelthera's exosuit drifted closer. It is not too late to return to the negotiating table. The Council is prepared to make significant concessions. John shook his head. My authorization to negotiate expired the moment I submitted our withdrawal. Any new agreements would require starting from zero, a process that would take years, if attempted at all. As if on cue, John's secure communication device activated with a priority signal from Earth Command. I need to take this, he said, turning away from the Chancellor. Admiral Davis's voice came through clearly. Representative Miller, the Council has called an emergency session. They're trying to prevent the departure of human engineers from critical infrastructure posts across 15 stations. We're getting reports of attempted detentions. That violates at least 7 interstellar conventions, John replied sharply, glancing back at Zelthera. Chancellor, is this happening with Executive Council authorization? The energy being's colors darkened. Some factions are acting independently out of desperation. The Council's infrastructure is too dependent on human expertise for hasty withdrawal. Those dependencies were created by your own policies, John pointed out. The Council repeatedly rejected our offers to train your species' engineers, preferring to maintain human technical crews as a form of control. An error in judgment, perhaps, Zelthera conceded. John turned his attention back to Admiral Davis. Implement Security Protocol Theta. Any station attempting to detain our people will see immediate systems lockdown. Across Council space, hundreds of essential systems, life support regulators, gravity controls, defense grids, communication arrays had been designed or modified by human engineers over the past 5 years. All contain deeply embedded security protocols that only a handful of high-ranking Earth officials knew about. Protocol Theta would activate those hidden measures, not to harm the station's inhabitants, but to demonstrate humanity's leverage. Consider carefully, John warned Zelthera. Earth wants a peaceful transition. We have no desire to see suffering or hardship, but we will protect our people. Before the Chancellor could respond, another emergency communication came through, this time from Susan Clark. John, the Council's called an emergency General Assembly. Every delegation has been summoned. They're displaying real-time data from stations where human engineers have begun withdrawing. I'll be right there, John replied, then addressed Zelthera one final time. It seems your colleagues are about to learn the consequences of their fear, Chancellor. The emergency assembly had none of the order or decorum of regular council proceedings. Delegates shouted over each other, while displays around the chamber showed cascading system failures across multiple stations. John and Susan stood at the back, observing the chaos without participating. Vexinar struggled to maintain control from the central podium. Order, the assembly will come to order immediately. On the main holographic display, red warning indicators multiplied across the galactic map. Station after station reported critical systems functioning at minimal capacity. Border defenses showed vulnerability alerts. Trade routes blinked with interruption notices. This is sabotage, shouted the Krell representative, a massive insectoid whose chitinous armor clicked with agitation. The humans have deliberately crippled our infrastructure. No. Admiral Jorak of the Telmari Defense Fleet countered, rising from his seat. As one of the Council's most respected military minds, his voice commanded attention. This is not sabotage. This is dependency. Our critical systems were designed and maintained primarily by human engineers. As they depart, those systems deteriorate naturally. Precisely why we cannot allow them to leave, the Krall representative insisted. Admiral Jorak's 4 eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting we hold sentient beings against their will? That would violate the very foundation of Council law? The debate raged on, growing increasingly desperate, as more systems reported failures. Life support remained stable across all stations. Earth had ensured that safety protocols would maintain essential functions, but everything from transportation networks to food distribution systems was beginning to collapse. This is what happens when you build your society on fear rather than trust, Susan whispered to John as they watched the Council tear itself apart with accusations and panic. Counselor Trin approached them cautiously, crystal body reflecting the red emergency lights. Representative Miller, Ambassador Clark, the crystalline being acknowledged. The Council finds itself in an uncomfortable position. A position of its own making, John replied evenly. Indeed, Trin admitted. Many of us argued against the neural monitor proposal, but the majority feared humanity's rapid advancement too much to listen. Susan stepped forward. And now reality asserts itself, Trin said simply. 15 critical stations face systemic collapse within days. 12 border regions will be vulnerable to incursion from non-council entities. 37 medical facilities lack the expertise to maintain advanced treatment protocols developed by human doctors. John had anticipated this moment when the Council would finally confront the true value of human contribution, rather than focusing on perceived threats. What exactly are you proposing, Counselor? He asked. The formation of a transitional committee, Trin explained. Not to reverse your withdrawal, that right is undeniable under Council law, but to establish a structured departure that prevents unnecessary suffering. It was a reasonable request, and one that aligned with humanity's own interests. John had no desire to see innocent beings suffer from infrastructure collapse. I'll need to consult with Earth Command, he said. But a transitional arrangement would be acceptable, provided all attempts to detain human personnel cease immediately. Trin's crystalline form shimmered with visible relief. I will convey your terms to the Executive Council right away. As the crystalline being departed, John and Susan watched the continuing chaos of the emergency assembly. The panic had moved beyond mere political concern. It had become existential. Without human expertise, much of the Council's infrastructure would fail. Without human defensive systems, border regions would become vulnerable. The carefully constructed facade of Council superiority was crumbling before their eyes. They never truly valued us as partners, Susan observed. Only as useful tools. John nodded slowly. And tools that might one day become too powerful for comfort. Earth Transport Vessel Horizon has docked at Gate 17, announced a station-wide alert. All Earth citizens with evacuation priority Alpha through Delta, please proceed to embarkation. That's our cue, Susan said. Most of our diplomatic staff is on that priority list. John checked his neural interface, reviewing the status of evacuation efforts across Council space. 97% of civilian dependents have been evacuated from Council territories. Essential personnel are withdrawing on schedule. He smiled faintly. Phoenix Protocol is proceeding exactly as designed. You never actually expected to use it, did you? Susan asked, as they made their way toward the diplomatic sector. I hoped we wouldn't, John admitted. But after the first year of Council membership, Admiral Davis and Director Powell insisted we prepare for all contingencies. The dependency issues became obvious early on. The Council wanted our expertise, but feared what we might become if given free rein. The corridors of Nexus Station's diplomatic sector were eerily quiet now. Most delegations were either attending the emergency assembly or locked in crisis meetings. The few aliens they encountered gave them a wide berth, some watching with obvious fear, others with what might have been respect. When they reached the Earth Embassy, most of the staff had already departed. Only a skeleton crew remained to secure the final evacuation and protect sensitive materials. John approached the central communication array and established a secure link to Earth Command. Admiral Davis appeared looking grim but satisfied. "Report, Representative Miller." "The Council is in full panic mode," John informed him. "They've requested a transitional committee to manage our withdrawal and prevent infrastructure collapse." "Not surprising," Davis nodded. "Our simulations predicted they'd reach this point approximately 72 hours after withdrawal announcement. They've actually realized their dependency faster than anticipated." Director Powell joined the communication. "The first wave of evacuees has already reached Earth space. Reintegration procedures are underway. How are things on your end?" "Proceeding according to plan," Susan answered. "We've had isolated incidents of Council authorities attempting to prevent departures, but Protocol Theta made them reconsider quickly." "When can we expect your departure?" Powell asked. John exchanged glances with Susan before answering. "Ambassador Clark will leave with the final diplomatic contingent within 6 hours. I've been asked to remain temporarily to establish transitional protocols with a Council committee." Admiral Davis frowned. "That wasn't part of Phoenix." "No," John acknowledged, "but it serves our interests. A stable transition prevents chaos that could harm innocent beings and gives us leverage for future bilateral agreements with individual systems." After a moment's consideration, Davis nodded. "Approved, but with conditions. You'll be transported to the neutral system of Sol for these negotiations. Council representatives can meet you there. No discussions on Nexus Station or other Council territory." "Understood," John agreed. "Oh, one more thing," Director Powell added. "The President has authorized me to inform you that the Sovereignty Declaration is being finalized. It will be announced within 48 hours. John felt a surge of both pride and apprehension. The Sovereignty Declaration had been drafted years ago, a comprehensive statement of humanity's independent development rights, free from external constraints. Under Council membership, it had remained a theoretical document. Now, it would become the foundation of Earth's new position in the galaxy. "That will certainly get their attention," he remarked. As the communication ended, Susan turned to John. "They're really going through with it, complete technological independence." "It's what the Council feared most," John said quietly. "Humanity developing without their constraints, creating technologies they can't control, or perhaps even understand." Susan's expression grew serious. "Do you ever wonder if maybe they were right to be afraid the neural interface program will accelerate dramatically without Council oversight? Who knows what we might become?" It was a question John had wrestled with himself. The Council's fear wasn't entirely irrational. Humanity's capacity for both creation and destruction was well documented throughout Earth's bloody history. But the answer had become clear to him during those long Council sessions. "Freedom always carries risk," he said finally. "But constraint guarantees stagnation. If humanity is to realize its potential for better or worse, it must chart its own course." 3 days later, John found himself aboard the Earth diplomatic vessel, Artemis, orbiting the neutral world of Sol. The system had never joined the Galactic Council, maintaining its independence through strategic trade relationships and a formidable defensive fleet. Its neutrality made it the perfect location for this unprecedented diplomatic situation. The Council delegation had arrived 12 hours earlier, consisting of High Chancellor Zelthera Counselor Trin, Admiral Zorak, and representatives from 7 key member species. Earth had sent a new representative, Congressman Kevin Wright, a seasoned politician with a reputation for both toughness and fairness. John's role had shifted from representative to advisor. "They're getting desperate," Congressman Wright observed as they reviewed the latest Council proposal. "This is the 3rd revision in as many hours." John studied the document on his neural interface. They've finally removed all language suggesting oversight of human technological development. That was the primary sticking point. And they've conceded to bilateral trade agreements outside Council framework, Wright added. That's significant. The meeting chamber aboard the Artemis was designed to accommodate various physiological needs with environmental controls that could create distinct microclimates for different species. The Council delegation occupied one side of the circular room, while Earth's representatives sat opposite them. Between them, holographic displays showed the status of transitioning stations and withdrawal timelines. High Chancellor Zelthera's exosuit drifted slightly forward. Has Earth's delegation had sufficient time to review our latest proposal? Congressman Wright nodded. We have, Chancellor. The terms regarding transitional support for critical infrastructure are acceptable. Earth will provide engineering teams for essential systems maintenance for a period not exceeding 6 months, after which Council technicians must assume full responsibility. 6 months is insufficient for complete knowledge transfer, protested the Kral representative. Our engineers require at least 2 standard years to master human technological implementations. Then I suggest they begin learning immediately, Wright replied calmly. The timeline is non-negotiable. Admiral Zorak intervened before the Kral could escalate further. The timeline is challenging, but not impossible. My fleet engineers have already begun accelerated training programs based on human technical manuals. John watched the Admiral with new respect. Unlike many Council members, Zorak seemed to understand that adaptation was preferable to desperate, clinging to old dependencies. There is one matter not addressed in your proposal. Zelthera noted her energy form pulsing slowly within the exosuit. The Council formally requests Earth's reconsideration of withdrawal. We are prepared to offer unprecedented autonomy within the Council framework, including exemption from standard technological oversight. The chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to Earth's delegation. John wasn't surprised by the request. It had been inevitable once the full impact of humanity's departure became clear. Congressman Wright's expression remained neutral. Chancellor Earth appreciates the Council's reconsideration of its position. However, our withdrawal is final. The fundamental incompatibility between Council regulatory philosophy and human development needs cannot be bridged by policy adjustments. Then, perhaps it could be bridged by structural reform, suggested Councillor Trin, crystalline form, shimmering. Several member species have proposed significant changes to Council governance in light of recent events. John exchanged glances with Wright. This was unexpected. Council structures had remained largely unchanged for millennia. What kind of reforms? Wright asked cautiously. A reassessment of the hierarchical structure that places elder species in permanent advisory positions, Trin explained. A recalibration of technological regulation to focus on safety rather than control. Most significantly, the creation of new categories of membership that allow for greater autonomy while maintaining cooperative frameworks. It was a surprising development, the Council actually considering reform rather than merely making temporary concessions. For a moment, John could glimpse a possible future where humanity might eventually return to a transformed interstellar community. Earth acknowledges these reform initiatives with interest, Wright responded diplomatically. However, our current trajectory remains unchanged. We are open to revisiting cooperative frameworks once the Council has actually implemented such reforms and demonstrated their effectiveness. The negotiations continued for several more hours, focusing primarily on practical matters: the orderly withdrawal of human personnel, the transition of technological systems, and the establishment of diplomatic channels outside Council structures. By the end, a comprehensive agreement had been reached, one that would prevent unnecessary hardship while respecting Earth's sovereign decision. As the Council delegation prepared to depart, High Chancellor Zelthera approached John privately. Representative Miller, though you no longer hold that title officially, I wish to speak with you one final time. John inclined his head respectfully. Of course, Chancellor. I have existed for over 4,000 of your years, Zelthera said, her voice emerging softly from the exosuit. "In that time, I have witnessed many species join the Council, and a few depart. But never have I seen one depart with such impact." "Impact wasn't our intention," John replied. "We simply refused to compromise on fundamental principles of autonomy." "Perhaps that is what makes your species unique," Zelthera observed. "Most join the Council seeking protection resources or status. Humanity joined seeking partnership, and when that partnership became unbalanced, you chose independence despite the costs." John considered her words carefully. "The Council has existed for 100 millennia by prioritizing stability over progress. That approach created a civilization spanning thousands of worlds and incredible achievement. But humanity measures time differently. We don't think in millennia. Our lives are brief, our urgency greater. And perhaps that is why you achieve in decades what takes others centuries," Zelthera acknowledged. "I have opposed many of the restrictions placed upon your species, though you may not have realized it. Some of us recognize that humanity's greatest value was not in what you could build for us, but in how you might change us." "Change is still possible," John suggested. "The reforms Councillor Trin mentioned are already facing significant opposition," Zelthera interrupted. "The Council does not transform easily, but your departure has created cracks in our ancient foundations. Whether those cracks will widen into collapse or force needed rebuilding remains to be seen." With that cryptic observation, the Chancellor drifted away, rejoining her delegation as they boarded their vessel. John watched them depart, wondering what the future held for the ancient institution that had so briefly included humanity among its members. 2 weeks later, John stood in the observation dome of Earth's orbital defense platform, watching as the planet rotated slowly beneath him. The blue-green world seemed unchanged, yet everything had transformed. Earth was truly independent now, charting its own course among the stars, without the guidance or constraints of the Galactic Council. The Sovereignty Declaration had been announced to tremendous public support. Its provisions outlined humanity's commitment to peaceful development, ethical technological advancement, and open cooperation with like-minded species. Most significantly, it rejected any external authority over human innovation, the very principle that had led to their Council withdrawal. "Quite a view, isn't it?" came Admiral Davis's voice, as he joined John at the transparent dome. "Never gets old," John agreed. "The Council sent another delegation to Luna Station yesterday," Davis informed him. "Third one this month. They're getting persistent." John smiled faintly. "Let me guess, more offers of special status membership." "With even fewer strings attached this time," the Admiral confirmed. "Director Powell sent them packing again, of course." Below them, launch platforms across Earth's surface prepared the next wave of colonization vessels. Without Council quotas limiting expansion, humanity was accelerating its settlement of nearby systems. The Neural Interface Program had already produced 2 major breakthroughs in the weeks since withdrawal advancements that would have taken years to approve under Council oversight. "The Centauri Coalition has reached out," Davis continued. "They're interested in a mutual defense agreement outside Council frameworks. 7 other independent systems have proposed trade partnerships." John wasn't surprised. Earth's withdrawal had created ripples throughout the galaxy, encouraging other systems that had chafed under Council restrictions to reconsider their own positions. The balance of power was shifting slowly but inexorably. "And the Phoenix Protocol?" John asked. "Transitioning to Phase 3, Davis replied. "Resource reallocation is 80% complete. Critical technologies previously reserved for Council-approved projects have been redirected to independent research initiatives. The Neural Advancement Program in particular has exceeded all projections." "Any reaction from the Council to that news?" Davis's expression hardened slightly. "Their surveillance vessels maintain position at the edge of our system. They're watching, analyzing. Some of the more aggressive members have proposed a technology containment policy, essentially an embargo on advanced human innovations." "Will it pass?" "Unlikely. Too many independent systems are already establishing trade relationships with us. A containment policy would only accelerate the Council's declining influence. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. The holographic figure of Director Karen Powell appeared before them, her normally composed features showing signs of urgent concern. "Admiral Davis, Representative Miller," she acknowledged. "We've received troubling information from our intelligence network. The Council's Military Advisory Committee has convened in secret session." John felt a chill. The Military Advisory Committee rarely met outside regular security assessments. A secret session suggested something far more serious. "Do we know the agenda?" Admiral Davis asked. "Our sources couldn't access the complete briefing," Powell replied. "But the session was called after their analysis of our latest neural interface breakthrough. The technology has progressed faster than even our most optimistic predictions, and far beyond what the Council believed possible without their oversight." John understood the implications immediately. "They're frightened. The very development they tried to prevent by proposing neural monitors is happening anyway, and at an accelerated pace." "Precisely," Powell confirmed. "Some factions are pushing for preemptive measures. Nothing over at the Council still lacks consensus for direct action, but we're seeing increased electronic intrusion attempts, diplomatic pressure on our new trading partners, and unusual fleet movements near key resource systems." Admiral Davis's expression remained calm, though his eyes hardened. "Our defensive posture being adjusted as we speak," Powell assured him. "But this confirms what we've suspected. Since withdrawal, the Council views independent human development as an existential threat, not merely a regulatory challenge." John moved away from the observation dome, his mind racing. The neural monitors had been just the visible symptom of a deeper fear that humanity might evolve beyond the Council's ability to influence or control. Now that fear was driving increasingly desperate measures. "We need to accelerate our diplomatic initiatives with independent systems," he suggested. "The Council's influence depends on isolation. If enough systems establish bilateral relations with Earth, their leverage diminishes." "Already underway," Powell nodded. "But there's another factor to consider. Several mid-tier Council members have quietly approached us about possible defection." That was unexpected. Membership in the Galactic Council had been considered the pinnacle of interstellar status for millennia. For established members to consider leaving suggested a fundamental shift in perception. "Which species?" Admiral Davis asked. "The Telmari for one," Powell replied. "Admiral Zorak has apparently been a vocal critic of Council policy toward Earth for years. The Novan Confederation is also reassessing its position, as are the Brecon Collective and Tau Republics." John recalled his interactions with Zorak during the transition negotiations. The four-eyed admiral had shown a pragmatic understanding of humanity's position that many other Council representatives lacked. "This goes beyond simple reaction to our withdrawal," John observed. "These species have likely harbored reservations about Council governance for centuries." "And found themselves unable to effect change from within," Powell agreed. "Our departure created a pressure crack in the Council's facade of unity. Those cracks are widening." Admiral Davis consulted his neural interface, reviewing fleet deployments and security assessments. "We should proceed cautiously. If the Council perceives a coordinated rebellion rather than isolated departures, they might take more aggressive action." "Agreed," John said. "We need to maintain a defensive posture while demonstrating that independence doesn't mean hostility. Our sovereignty declaration emphasized peaceful development. We should reinforce that message at every opportunity." The conversation continued for another hour, analyzing intelligence reports and adjusting strategic responses. When it finally concluded, John remained at the observation dome, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath him. The planet appeared unchanged, yet its relationship with the galaxy had transformed fundamentally in just a few short weeks. Earth had declared its technological and developmental independence from a governmental body that had ruled the stars for 100,000 years. The consequences were still unfolding, rippling outward like waves from a stone dropped in a cosmic pond. Some of those consequences had been anticipated by the Phoenix Protocol, but others, like potential council members considering defection, suggested more profound changes ahead. Independence carried both opportunity and risk. Without council restrictions, human innovation was accelerating dramatically. The Neural Interface Program had already achieved breakthroughs that would transform humanity's relationship with technology. Colonial expansion proceeded at nearly twice the previously permitted rate. Earth's defensive capabilities evolved daily, incorporating technologies that would have required years of council approval. Yet this very progress fueled the council's fear, potentially driving them toward desperate measures. The balance between progress and provocation would require careful management in the months and years ahead. As John contemplated these challenges, a notification appeared in his neural interface. The alert originated from Dr. Elizabeth Chen, lead researcher on the Neural Advancement Program. Representative Miller. Her message began, "We've achieved something extraordinary. The prototype N7 interface has established successful synchronization across autonomous systems without degradation or delay. In simple terms, we've created a technological framework that can evolve without direct human intervention while remaining perfectly aligned with human intention." John stared at the message, understanding its monumental implications. The breakthrough described wasn't just an incremental advance. It represented a fundamental shift in how technology and consciousness could interact. It was precisely the kind of development the Council had feared: most technology that could accelerate its own evolution while remaining intrinsically connected to human guidance. The Council's proposal for neural monitors now seemed almost tragically quaint. They had wanted to monitor human intentions, fearing where those intentions might lead. Instead, humans had created technology that was an extension of intention itself, not constrained by it, but perfectly aligned with it. John composed a brief response congratulating Dr. Chen and her team, while requesting a full security protocol for the research. Then he gazed back at Earth, wondering what humanity might become in the decades ahead. The neural technology would transform not just their capabilities, but potentially their very nature, enhancing cognition, expanding perception, perhaps even redefining consciousness itself. Would the Council's fears be justified? Would humanity evolve into something that other galactic species couldn't understand or compete with? Or would this newfound freedom of development lead to a more balanced relationship with the cosmos, innovation without aggression, advancement without dominance? The answer, John realized, would depend not on Council regulations or interstellar politics, but on choices made by humans themselves. Freedom carried responsibility. Independence demanded wisdom. The path ahead would be determined not by what humanity could become, but by what it chose to become. 6 months after Earth's withdrawal from the Galactic Council, the transition period established in the Sol Accords reached its conclusion. The last human engineering teams departed from Council stations, leaving behind fully trained local technicians and comprehensive maintenance protocols. Despite dire predictions, the infrastructure transfer had proceeded smoothly, with only minor disruptions in non-essential services. On Earth, the changes were more profound. The Neural Interface Program had produced 3 generations of increasingly sophisticated technology, each more seamlessly integrated with human cognition than the last. Colonial expansion had established 17 new outposts in previously restricted systems. Trade agreements with independent worlds had replaced 90% of the economic activity previously conducted through Council channels. Most significantly, 6 former Council members had declared their own independence, citing Earth's example as inspiration. The Telmari, under Admiral Jorek's leadership, had been the first to depart, followed by the Novans Brecken's Tau, Republic's Duridian Alliance, and Morrow Collectivity. Each had established bilateral relations with Earth, and with each other creating a loose network of independent systems that now represented a significant power block in the galactic neighborhood. The Council itself had undergone painful but necessary reforms. The hierarchical structure that had placed elder species in permanent advisory positions had been replaced with a more representative model. Technological regulations had been revised to focus on safety rather than control. Most importantly, new membership categories had been created, allowing for greater autonomy while maintaining cooperative frameworks. These changes came too late to entice Earth's return, but they had prevented further defections and begun the long process of modernizing an institution that had remained essentially unchanged for millennia. John Miller, no longer a council representative, but now serving as Earth's ambassador at large to independent systems, stood in the diplomatic reception hall of the newly constructed Harmony Station. The massive structure orbited the neutral world of Lyra, serving as a meeting point for Earth, former council members, and independent systems, seeking cooperation outside council frameworks. "Quite different from Nexus Station, isn't it?" Susan Clark observed as she joined him near the floor-to-ceiling viewport that showcased Lyra's azure oceans and emerald continents. "By design," John agreed. "No hierarchical seating, no dominant species architecture, and absolutely no neural monitors." Susan smiled at the last reference. "Hard to believe it's been only 6 months since that proposal set everything in motion." "Sometimes the smallest catalyst can trigger the largest changes," John mused. The council had been accumulating structural stress for centuries, species chafing under restrictions, innovation stifled by regulation, newer members frustrated by the dominance of elder species. Our withdrawal was just the fracture point that exposed those underlying tensions. The reception hall gradually filled with representatives from dozens of worlds. Some had been council members until recently, others had maintained independence for generations, and still others were newly spacefaring species, seeking partnerships without council oversight. Ambassador Zorak of the Telmari approached his 4 eyes, blinking in sequence, a sign of satisfaction in his species. Ambassador Miller, Ambassador Clark. He greeted them using Earth's translation protocols, rather than standard galactic. "The Council's delegation has just arrived. High Chancellor Zelthera leads them personally." John wasn't surprised. Zelthera had been one of the few council leaders who had understood the deeper implications of Earth's withdrawal from the beginning. Her presence at this gathering of independent systems suggested she still sought understanding rather than confrontation. "Will you speak with her?" Susan asked after Zorak had moved on to greet other arrivals. "If she wishes," John replied. "There's no lingering hostility on our part, just irreconcilable differences in approach." As if summoned by their conversation, Zelthera's distinctive exosuit appeared at the entrance to the reception hall. The ancient energy being floated serenely among the gathered representatives, acknowledging greetings, but clearly moving with purpose toward John and Susan. "Ambassador Miller, Ambassador Clark." Her voice emerged from the exosuit with its characteristic calm. "It is good to see familiar faces in unfamiliar surroundings." "Chancellor," John inclined his head respectfully. "We appreciate your presence here. It sends an important message. That the Council acknowledges the legitimacy of independent development paths," Zelthera suggested. "Yes, that was precisely my intent. The reforms we've implemented are still insufficient, but they represent progress toward a more balanced relationship with newer species." Susan regarded the energy being curiously. "May I ask a personal question, Chancellor?" "Of course." "You've existed for over 4,000 years and led the Council for nearly half that time. Yet you seem more accepting of these radical changes than many younger leaders. Why is that?" The energy within Zelthera's exosuit pulsed with soft colors that suggested amusement. "Perhaps because I have witnessed similar patterns before. Civilizations rise and fall. Governing structures calcify and crumble. Knowledge advances and recedes. The only constant is change itself." She drifted slightly closer. "What humanity triggered was inevitable, Ambassador Clark. The Council had grown too rigid, too fearful of disruption. We had prioritized stability to such an extent that we began suppressing the very innovation that had once made us great. John considered her words carefully. Yet the neural monitor proposal came during your leadership. A concession to those who feared humanity's potential, Zelthera acknowledged. I could not prevent its proposal, though I never supported its implementation. Some battles must be lost before greater victories can be achieved. Before John could respond, a soft chime announced the formal commencement of the gathering. Representatives from 37 independent systems took their places around the circular chamber, with Earth and the 6 former council members occupying positions of honor near the center. The Galactic Council delegation led by Zelthera was granted equal status, a diplomatic courtesy that acknowledged their continued importance without conferring special authority. Councillor Trin, whose crystalline form shimmered beneath the chamber's subtle lighting, had been selected to chair this historic meeting. As a moderate voice within the council who had advocated for reform even before Earth's withdrawal, Trin represented a bridge between the old order and the new possibilities emerging across the galaxy. Distinguished representatives, Trin began, we gather today to formalize cooperative agreements between sovereign systems outside traditional frameworks. Each world represented here has chosen its own development path, while recognizing the value of mutual cooperation in matters of trade security and scientific advancement. John listened as Trin outlined the proposed agreements arrangements that would facilitate exchange without imposing uniformity, that would coordinate defensive measures without centralizing authority, that would share knowledge without restricting its application. It represented a fundamentally different approach to interstellar relations than the Council had employed for millennia. As the proceedings continued, John reflected on the extraordinary journey that had led to this moment. 6 months ago, he had stood alone before the Galactic Council, facing their fear and suspicion as he declared Earth's independence. The path since had not been easy. There had been economic disruptions, security challenges, and diplomatic crises to navigate. Yet humanity had emerged stronger, more unified in purpose, more certain of its place among the stars. The Council's fear had been both right and wrong. They had correctly anticipated that unrestrained human development would transform the galactic landscape, challenging ancient power structures and accelerating technological evolution beyond their comfort. But they had been wrong to assume this transformation would be destructive, rather than regenerative, wrong to believe that control was preferable to cooperation between equals. As ambassador at large, John had visited dozens of worlds in the past 6 months. He had witnessed societies embracing new possibilities, casting off restrictions that had bound them for generations. He had seen species that had once competed fiercely under council frameworks, now collaborating as sovereign equals. Most importantly, he had observed humanity itself, evolving not just technologically, but philosophically, developing a deeper understanding of its place in the cosmic community. The Neural Advancement Program continued to produce breakthroughs that would have terrified the Council, interfaces that blurred the boundaries between mind and machine enhancements, that expanded human perception beyond traditional senses networks, that connected consciousness across vast distances. Yet these developments had been guided by ethical principles, more stringent than any council regulation, shaped by a recognition that power without wisdom was merely capacity for greater error. Trin's voice brought John back to the present moment. And so we formalize these agreements not as a replacement for the Galactic Council, but as an alternative path for sovereign systems, seeking cooperation without subordination. Representatives from each world, including Earth, approached the central platform to register their formal acceptance. As John placed his hand on the recognition panel, he felt a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun with a desperate stand against neural monitors had led to this new beginning, not just for humanity, but for dozens of species seeking a different relationship with each other and with the cosmos. Later, as the formal proceedings gave way to diplomatic mingling, John found himself once more near the viewport, overlooking Lyra's stunning landscapes. High Chancellor Zelthera drifted to his side, her exosuit hovering silently as they both gazed at the world below. "A beautiful planet," she observed. untouched by council influence or independent development until now. A fitting symbol for what begins here today. John nodded. New paths require new beginnings. I have a question, Ambassador Miller, Zelthera said, after a moment. One I've considered since your withdrawal declaration. Did humanity join the Council with the intention of eventually leaving it? John considered the question carefully. No, he answered honestly. We joined seeking genuine partnership and exchange of knowledge, resources, and perspectives that would benefit all parties. The Neural Monitor proposal simply revealed that true partnership wasn't possible within existing frameworks. And now we build different frameworks, John replied. One's based on sovereignty, rather than submission, cooperation, rather than control. Your presence here suggests the Council itself recognizes the value in this approach, even if it cannot adopt it fully. The energy within Zelthera's exosuit pulsed with complex patterns. The Council changes slowly, Ambassador. Too slowly for species like yours, perhaps. But it does change. Perhaps in another century, the differences between our approaches will have diminished enough for renewed consideration of formal relationships. John smiled at the energy being's time frame. A century is a significant portion of a human lifetime, Chancellor. But I don't disagree with your assessment. The Sovereignty Declaration left open the possibility of future Council membership under sufficiently reformed conditions. A diplomatic courtesy, rather than a serious consideration. Zelthera suggested, her tone indicating no offense taken. At the time, perhaps, John admitted. But if today's gathering demonstrates anything, it's that previously unimaginable changes can occur with surprising speed when circumstances demand them. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert on John's neural interface, a priority communication from Earth Command. He excused himself and moved to a private alcove before accepting the transmission. Admiral Davis's holographic form appeared before him, expression serious, but not alarmed. Ambassador Miller, we've received an unusual communication from the Nexus Directorate. The Council's scientific division, John asked, surprised. The Directorate had been among the most vocal critics of human technological development. The very same, Davis confirmed. They've requested a collaborative research initiative focused on neural interface technology, specifically the integration protocols that Dr. Chen's team developed. John was momentarily speechless. The Directorate had previously dismissed Earth's neural research as dangerously unregulated. For them to now request collaboration represented an astonishing reversal. What prompted this? He finally asked. Apparently, several Council species have begun developing their own neural interfaces in response to our breakthroughs, Davis explained. Without proper integration protocols, the Directorate fears these systems could become unaligned with organic consciousness, precisely the outcome they initially feared from human development. The irony wasn't lost on John. Their attempts to prevent our research have led directly to the scenario they most dreaded: unregulated neural technology spreading across multiple species. With one critical difference, Davis noted. Humans developed ethical frameworks alongside the technology. These new initiatives lack that foundation. John understood immediately. They need our expertise not just in creating the technology, but in creating it safely. Precisely, Davis confirmed. Director Powell has already consulted with Dr. Chen and the neural research team. They believe a limited knowledge-sharing arrangement could prevent potential disasters while maintaining our technological advantage. And demonstrate that independence doesn't mean isolation, John added, thinking through the diplomatic implications. This could open pathways for constructive engagement, even while maintaining our sovereign development. After discussing the specifics of the Directorate's request and Earth's potential response, John ended the communication and returned to the reception. As he navigated through the gathering of diverse species, each representing worlds that had chosen their own paths among the stars, he reflected on how completely the galactic landscape had transformed in just 6 months. The Council that had once seemed an immutable fixture of interstellar civilization now represented just one approach among many. Earth, which had withdrawn in defense of its autonomy, now found itself engaged in a complex web of bilateral relationships with dozens of sovereign systems. And the neural technology that had sparked the initial conflict might now become a bridge between previously antagonistic approaches. John caught sight of Susan, deep in conversation with representatives from 3 former council worlds. Beyond them, Ambassador Jorak conferred with delegates from newly spacefaring species, seeking guidance without oversight. Near the central platform, Councillor Trin and other moderate council representatives engaged with independent systems about potential collaborative ventures. This was not the fragmented, chaotic outcome that council hardliners had predicted when Earth withdrew. Nor was it the isolated technological development path that some human advocates had envisioned. Instead, a new equilibrium was emerging, one based on sovereign choice, rather than centralized authority, on collaborative networks, rather than hierarchical structures. As John made his way toward Susan and her discussion group, his thoughts returned to that pivotal moment 6 months ago when he had first glimpsed the neural monitor proposal. The Council's attempt to constrain human potential had instead unleashed it not just for humanity, but for countless species that had labored under similar restrictions. Fear of what humanity might become had driven the Council to propose measures that violated basic autonomy. That same fear had blinded them to the consequences of their actions, the fracturing of an ancient institution, the emergence of new development paths, the transformation of galactic power structures that had endured for millennia. Yet from that fear and its consequences, something extraordinary had emerged. Species that had once interacted primarily through council frameworks now engaged directly sovereign to sovereign. Technologies that had been restricted now evolved rapidly under ethical guidelines developed by their creators rather than imposed by distant authorities. And humanity itself advanced not in isolation, but in a complex network of relationships with diverse civilizations across the stars. The galaxy was changing, and would continue to change in ways that neither the Council nor humanity could fully predict. But it would do so with a newfound respect for sovereignty, for diversity of approach, for the right of each species to determine its own destiny among the stars. As the gathering continued around him, John found himself thinking of Earth, rotating serenely below the orbital platform where this journey had begun. From that single world, humans had reached toward the stars, seeking connection without submission, advancement without dominance, cooperation without control. The path had not been easy, and challenges certainly remained ahead, but the fundamental principle that had guided them remained true. Freedom carried risks, but constraint guaranteed stagnation. In the vastness of the cosmos with its countless worlds and civilizations, that simple truth might prove the most valuable contribution of all.